Hello and welcome to Mandibil. This will be part 22 of my deconstruction of Stefan Molyneux's book, Essential Philosophy. And I've had a good week or so pause in this series because I got a cold, a winter cold, and my voice was basically disappearing at least for a few nights, right? So I had to get back on my feet to continue this deconstruction. And hopefully you have been feasting on my fantastic philosophy regarding this, and hopefully you have been waiting impatiently for the next chapter in this story. Okay, just a little fun quote, right? A fun comment. I jumped. I have to spend a few words on that. I'm having a hot cup of tea here next to me, so I'm good to go. I'm excuse me. I'm warming my hands on the tea. So enough of that bullshit. Small talk. This is serious stuff. I jumped over his ethics last time because first of all, I was getting pretty tired of his way of arguing in this book, right? And it's basically a very, very simplistic condensation, in fact, without any decent philosophy at all, ethics, where he just says, this is what I do, this is the way I do it, this is my system, and therefore I'm right. It's sort of it's very superficial, right? And it's all also poisoned with a lot of references to Christianity and politics and social justice and all sorts of bullshit that is pulled in also. So it's like saying that Coca-Cola is pure water, right? No. It's poisoned water, like Aragorn would say in that movie, whatever it was, right? Not Aragorn, but the actor, I forget his name. That it's not pure water, but there's the taste stuff in, and there's sugar in it, and there's colors and all sorts of stuff, right? So it's not pure, right? So it's like his philosophy here is just one big fucking gumbo of all sorts of a stream of consciousness just poured into the paper, right? And the way I interpret what he's trying to do is instead of going the rigid philosophy route, he's going the very light-hearted, very superficial mainstream route through philosophy, right? But that's not philosophy. That's a point of mine, right? So just be aware that's my understanding. So not that I'm calling this necessarily philosophy. I mean, it would maybe be an insult to not call it philosophy, but then I would classify it as a very, very, very bad philosophy, in the sense that philosophy is a kind of thinking. It's not a presentation of conclusions, right? It's not, because I'm a philosopher, I'm going to tell you how to live your life and all that. Be aware, whenever people calling themselves philosophers or whatever, let's say calling themselves philosophers, whenever they say, I'm here to save you, basically, right? I'm here to tell you what to do and how to live your life and everything will be better and sort of, it's bullshit, right? Philosophy is basically a cleanup system, right? It's when you methodically and rigidly sit down and think about everything you normally think about, right? Your habitual, normal, first level thinking, right? Sort of philosophy is a second level thinking when you think about how you ordinarily think. Well, you go to work and you drive your car. You're not really thinking about what you're doing, if you get my drift, right? You just do it because you've done it so many times, and it's only when a zebra falls from the sky, you're going to say, holy shit, what was that? And then all your senses are alerted and they're thinking, and you're like, what am I going to do this, going to do that, right? So you're out of your normal habitual way of thinking. So the zebra to stay with the analogy, falling from the sky is an alert towards philosophy, right? When you're thinking about how to approach this thing, not the thing itself, but what thinking am I habitually using to approach life in general, all sorts of situations, right? So when you sit down and think about how you think, that's basically getting rid of all the bullshit that you either have created yourself or have been more or less force-fed by your peers and your friends and your girlfriends and your mother and father and priests and politicians. Basically, everything you have been told is just bullshit, right? And when you sit down and remove all this shit and see what the hell is left, right? How do we all understand what it means to be true? How do we understand what it means to know? How do we understand what it means to be moral, right? When you sit down and do this, basically to get to that point, you have to remove all the bullshit. So 99% of philosophy is basically getting rid of bullshit rather than telling somebody what to do, right? And when it all gets down, it's just your thinking. You are the one philosophizing about your thinking. How could it be more subjective? Because you are the subject doing that philosophy about how you as a subject are thinking about things. One of the illusions you might have is that you are part of this greater universe and society and culture and religion and politics, and you're in this camp or in this camp. That's all that bullshit you have to get rid of. And the frightening thing for most people going down this sort of rabbit hole is that there's not really much left to think about when you get rid of all the bullshit, right? But still, if you get rid of all the bullshit, right, and you get down to the bare bone basics, still it's you who has to figure out, okay, I have done some thinking. How do I think about the next situation I will get into in the future? Well, you don't have the future here. You have to be in that future in order to make that decision based on your thinking and your improved thinking, because you've done some philosophy, right? So you're taking better decisions based on a thinking that has been clarified by meta-thinking, which is philosophy, right? But who can tell you what to do in that situation? Well, nobody but you, right? Nobody but you. You can. Why would you, if you have done some philosophy? Why would you say, okay, now I have done all that philosophy and get rid of all the bullshit and I've arrived to some kind of moral principle or an understanding of what knowledge is and truth and all that, right? And what does it mean to exist and all that? And why would you then go out and say, okay, now I have to listen to Stefan Molyneux and he has to tell me what to do, or Immanuel Kant, or Friedrich Nietzsche, or Kierkegaard, or Aquinas, or whoever, right? Plato. That's exactly what you shouldn't do. A philosopher should say, you have to do it yourself. You have to think for yourself, right? Don't give me money to tell you what to do. That's against the whole idea of philosophy. Think fucking for yourself, right? There's only one problem seen with the eyes of Stefan Molyneux. There's not much business model in telling people, no, don't give me money. Focus on yourself and your own life and your subjectivity and your understanding of how the world works. Nobody can tell you how you should think, right? Then there's no business model in it, right? So he has to do something like this, right? So, and I jump over this very lighthearted, extremely lighthearted, simplistic approach to philosophy and ethics, in particular because I have done the whole deconstruction of the first part of his book called UPB, or Universally Preferable Behavior, where I go in depth. Every sentence basically is deconstructed in the proof part of his book, so-called proof, right? Which is also an invalid notion in philosophy. So I would urge you to go and listen to my deconstruction of UPB, which, if it's not in a link down here, it's actually it would be on my YouTube or my Odysee channel, some almost a year ago, early this year, early 2021, I think I did it, right? And so there's a bit of a hole in this deconstruction. Let me see how far I actually want to go with this, right? Because then we get to a chapter here called The Value of Philosophy. I mean, we are at page 121, and now he talks about the value of philosophy. Shouldn't that be very, very, very early in there? It's just, I'm not saying it necessarily wrong or anything along those lines, but it's just weird, right? It doesn't seem to be thought out or laid out or planned that this is the natural step. After doing 40 pages of determinism versus free will and 40 pages of condensation of his ethics and all sorts of other stuff he brings in, right? Then we talk about the value of philosophy. Why do we talk about that after he has presented, quote, his philosophy? It's just weird, right? Shouldn't it come, instead of me telling you, you should take the bicycle and go down there and go do this and do that, and after 5 days I'm going to tell you why you are going to do it, right? Wouldn't it be smart to tell me before, or I told you before you ride that bicycle, the actual value of riding that bicycle, right? Instead of him talking about metaphysics, epistemology, and so on, and starting about what is the value of this philosophy. Now, it comes here in page 121. Now we're talking about the value of philosophy. It's just the decisions on where to put what seems like he has no sensitivity of planning things like this, right? I can't. I just bumped my elbow into a chair. You know, this electricity that goes through your hand or your arm. So it's just weird, right? I mean, I hadn't high hopes for this book, right? But I'm actually still, disappointed. It's like I would avoid this at all cost, right? This is, I mean, it's an insult to the whole idea of philosophy to present this as a supposedly serious philosopher, the biggest philosophy show in the world, the only one who can save every Western civilization and all this, right? Holy fuck, right? I mean, it's bombastic and borderline megalomaniac, right? He has no sensitivity for. I mean, it's like he can boast about his abilities as a philosopher, and when he talks and he has interviews, it looks like he's very knowledgeable and good at philosophy. He can name drop and use the right terms in the right place, so people are like, oh my God, he must be so great, right? But when you go down to the text, what he's actually written and say, this is my philosophy, it sucks like that intergalactic vacuum, right? It's like, it's so awfully bad, right? And I'm not trying to go on hyperbole, but I'm trying to extend the level of my confusion and disappointment when reading what he's actually trying to do, right? So it's like, it's on another planet, right? Okay, let's try the value of philosophy. There it is again. We have tried organizing society. No, I have not tried to organize anything, right? It's this we. He has to collectivize everything. He can't speak for himself because he's afraid that everybody's going to say, okay, then it's just you, right? If you're saying, I am thinking this and I have tried to do that and I'm thinking this and I'm doing that, then it's just him doing stuff, right? No, he has to do that we thing, right? It's not something that is particularly uncommon when you read text. Everybody does it, right? Because they're afraid they will be left alone if they say, well, that's just me thinking this, right? They can work from a subjectivity, which is actually the problem in philosophy and most other ideas of presenting thought. People can't present it as, this is my thinking. They have to rally somebody. They have to do at least we have done this and we have tried that, right? So there are some cornerstones in philosophy that has been violated, or that is constantly violated, which, what's the word I'm looking for? Which inhibits philosophers' ability to convince anybody else, because they're dragging people into their thinking, like Stefan Molyneux does here. We have tried. Who are those we? Can you make a list of these people? Is it all 8 billion or 15 billion people in the history of the earth? Or is it just your friends or your community or whatever, right? Community. Who are these we? It's just bad thinking. It's bad presentation of thinking, at least, right? He might have some better thinking in his head, but does that help me if what I'm reading is something different, right? I'm not going to, attempt to second guess what he's actually thinking apart from what he's writing. I have to take his writing as what he's thinking. Otherwise, I'm just violating any idea of an approach to reading philosophy, right? We have tried organizing society in countless different ways, none of which fundamentally involve philosophy. Philosophers have tried entering politics, just like Stefan Molyneux. Plato took this approach in Syracuse and almost ended up being sold into slavery, but that generally meant playing by the foggy rules of sophistry, manipulation, and coercion. It is dangerous to tell the truth to a society programmed to love lies. We have tried organizing society by religion, by class, by theocracy, by tribalism, by democracy, by republics, according to the general will, via fascism, communism, socialism, power of the aristocracy, and the influence of money over the state. We have tried just about everything except reason, evidence, and universal morality. We have tried revolutions which impose irrational ideologies, usually by force, upon the unwilling masses. We have tried wiping the traditional social values out of existence and replacing them with propaganda, which results in endless and brutal disasters. We have tried appealing to sentimentality, emotion, patriotism, racism, and all the volatile, often destructive passions of the mob. The mob? Okay, so he has sort of a... Right? He has sort of an implicit authoritarian approach, right? The mob, all these people that can be lured into whatever by a sophist, right? So he's again this. Every thief thinks that a robber thinks that everybody robs, right? A thief thinks that everybody steals, right? A sophist thinks that everybody is using sophistry to control this mob, right? So it's a mob mentality, you could say, right? Not the right word, right? But there are sort of little hints dropped here and there between the lines that you have to sort of approach. It's sort of a Freudian slip, whatever you will call it, right? We have deployed sophistry, falsehoods, indoctrination, manipulation, superstition, ostracism for nonconformity, verbal attacks, slander, libel, endless state-sponsored violence, with the result that we face imminent disaster as a civilization. The appeal to reason goes back thousands of years, at least to the time of Socrates. It has always remained incomplete and fragmentary, largely because the twin tyrannies of theology and statism threatened or killed those who questioned their imaginary principles. As free speech gained more certain footing, ostracism, and it's again this, he's lecturing from his history teacher stool, right? It's less, oh, we have done this and they have done that. It's the broad sweeping stuff. Who cares? This is philosophy. This is not a history lesson, right? I'm not saying it's necessarily incorrect what he's writing, but it has nothing to do in the sense of philosophy, right? Academics, media personalities, and owners, publishers, movie and television studio heads, you name it, the gatekeepers were always out in full force, making sure that discussion remained somewhat lively, but only within very narrow parameters. The growth of the internet, of unfiltered conversation, has created the great gift of the possibility of reason to mankind for the first time in human history. the possibility, and it also leaves the possibility that I can do a deconstruction of bad philosophy like I'm doing here. The possibility of universal and direct speech among the curious and the thoughtful has never before existed and is quite threatened in the here and now. The possibility exists in a very narrow window, I believe, that we may finally be able to submit essential questions of good and evil, force and peace, violence versus voluntarism, to philosophy, to the twin judges of reason and evidence. The twin judges. Forces opposed to philosophy, most of the existing power structures in the world, from the state to academics to the mainstream media to public and private power mongers of every kind, gather, even as you read this, even as we speak, to shut down the growing voices demanding and respecting philosophy. Mankind has the power to think and reason, to oppose evil and to support virtue. Yes, throwing about words like this, but the whole idea of philosophy is figuring out what do we mean by evil or virtue, right? Yeah, you have touched upon it, right? But your philosophy is far from sufficient in these areas, right? You're just juggling words around and say, aha, I created something, right? There has to be some reference to metaphysical insights, right? There has to be some reduction base, as I said, that you can always go back to through your axioms or through your philosophy. And there's none of that. It's just, throwing words around, right? Mankind has the power to think and reason, to oppose evil and support virtue. We are born with this power, but it is scoured and stripped from us through omnipresent propaganda and violence. Our birthright is free thought. Our upbringing is ever escalating censorship and abuse. Society remains trapped within a dismal cycle wherein economic freedoms bring wealth. Wealth brings political corruption, and corruption brings social collapse. As the old saying goes, hard men bring good times bring weak men, and weak men bring bad times. The only way out of this cycle is through philosophy, through an acceptance of submission to objective reality and rationality. Yeah, but there's no acceptance of submission, right? This is, it freaks me out, right? And he's, of course, going to be Plato telling everybody about this perfect world, right? And say you have to obey, do as you're told, or you could be shot, right? Acceptance and submission. Oh, man, right? Get the fuck away from me. Through the development and promulgation of universal and rational ethical propositions. He's just throwing words around, right? He's just throwing words around. It sounds great. There's nothing in it. You can't find anything and say, okay, now I have an understanding of what he means, what he's doing in his everyday life. He's just a guy sitting in his living room throwing around words onto the internet and convincing people to give him money. He has no idea what he's doing, right? It sounds great. He has good intentions, possibly, but that doesn't make it good philosophy, right? All of this sounds wonderful. Who could be against the rational? Which begs the question, why has it yet to be achieved? No, it's always achieved. Everybody is rational all the time. What you're saying is that they have a perfect combination of reasoning and morality. That's what you're going for, right? You should be able to reason that this is immoral, therefore I shouldn't do it. It's rational to be the Pope, right? Running around with a cheek cozy and a funny hat and, waving sticks and saying funny words, and people give you money, right? That's rational. I mean, what's irrational about it? I don't understand why it's not rational. Of course it's rational. It's not necessarily moral, right? I wouldn't know how to judge whether or not it's moral, comparing with whatever you have done in ethics, right? But you are conflating or confusing the terms, mate, right? Rational is when you judge whether something is valuable to you or not. If it's valuable to me to drink a sip of my tea, I will drink a sip of my tea. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it, right? But there's no connection to morality there. And basically what you're after is a moral system, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if people are reasonable or rational or whatever, as long as they are not violating a moral principle, right? I couldn't care less what people I don't know do, as long as they are, adhering to the moral principle, you could say, right? So whatever else you do, right? And I might have some virtue judgment and say, yeah, you are doing this. It's not immoral, but I don't like it either way. I don't find it virtuous, so I'm going to, stick to myself. So I can make that kind of judgment, but that's purely, subjective. It's my personal judgment. The moral principles should be sort of connected to some kind of objectivity. That's why it's so important with objectivity and understanding. Have a good, correct understanding of objectivity. That is simple and easy to use, right? Everybody can do it, right? So it's like he's just throwing words around. He's basically a sophist, right? He's just throwing words around and make you as being the one-eyed king of the blind who thinks that he's a great philosopher. And also you might notice that everybody who has other ideas about philosophy, they're either crazy or stupid or out to get you or manipulative or some sort of, statist, whatever, something, right? The only right philosophy is his, right? It's always been that way with Stefan Molyneux, right? That's why it's cultish, right? Those who has a cultist inclination, they will convert to Stefan Molyneux because he gives them all the cultism they want, right? They want to be in this little confined box of people, just like Ayn Rand and Pythagoras and all these who had a sort of a system of the world, and we are closing ourselves, fencing us in here, and everybody's out to get us if they don't follow our system, right? Philosophy will never work that way, right? Never. It will only be ridiculed. It has yet to be achieved because philosophy has yet to take down its greatest foe. Oh, take down the foe, right? It's this lingo is sort of militant or, fairy tale, gothic, knights in shining armor fighting the beast and things like that, right? The universalization of equality under the law eliminated slavery and the various injustices against minorities. And it is working slowly but surely against the prejudice of childism, the acceptance of male and female genital mutilation, and the physical violence against the mental drugging of and the overall neglect of children. Equality under the law is not a universalization, since there are those who remain above the law, not just in the theory but in practice. The existence of centralized lawmakers of the state is a violation of universality and rationality, and thus remains an anti-rational moral hypothesis. Taxation is the initiation of force to take property. Science does not advance through voting. Scientific theory is not considered valid if 51 out of 100 scientists vote for it. Moral propositions do not become valid because the majority votes for them. 2 men in a forest do not morally get to rape a woman they find, even if all 3 put in a vote. 2 crazy people do not logically get to override a mathematician who tells them that 2 and 2 make 4. Truth, reason, objectivity, and virtue lie outside the collective mindlessness of the mob. The mob voted to put Socrates to death. Their vote did not make the murder moral. Sophists love to make the mob the standard of virtue because sophists are so good at manipulating the passions of the mob. Well, he should know. It takes one to know one, right? The essence of sophistry. Okay, that could be an interesting thing, right? The essence of sophistry. Let me see, how far did I get? I need to see how much time I've spent. How much time have I spent? There's just been an update to Streamlabs desktop, so I'm not even sure how much time I've spent. Where the hell did I used to see that? God damn. There used to be somewhere it showed how much time I'd spent. Maybe I have to click on a button here. No, I don't. Not that button, at least. Okay. I have a sense that I've spent like 40 minutes or something like that on this. So maybe it would make sense to drop into sophistry. Okay, then we get to sample. I think I'll take this. It seems like the book is almost getting to a close now, right? Okay. The essence of sophistry. The main purpose of sophistry, its main value to those in charge, is its capacity to create pseudo-universals. Pseudo-universals? If you can create a rule called thou shalt not steal, and then create an exception to that rule for yourself, your group, your tribe, or your government, then you are about the most effective thief you can be. Governments were instituted so the belief goes to protect property and people. This is entirely false, as history clearly shows. Government protect people in the way that farmers protect their livestock in order to ensure maximum continued exploitation. If governments were so interested in protecting people, then why did governments murder over 250 million of their own citizens outside of war in the 20th century alone? Governments protect property because property rights promote wealth generation. Governments apply property rights to their taxed livestock in the way that farmers apply antibiotics to their meat livestock. If governments were so interested in protecting property, then why do government? But why you? If this, when he's talking about generalized things like sophistry, he's jumping into a certain aspect of the use of sophistry, right? Because he has a certain agenda, a certain point he wants to bring across. He wants to tell you that government is bad and philosophy is good. Well, yeah, okay. But philosophize about it. Don't give me this. It's not the place to do this kind of politics and religion and all this. It's not essential philosophy, right? It's not essential philosophy. Philosophy is a kind of thinking. It's not looking at the government. Yes, you have a philosophy that might end up you having a certain approach to government. But that's not him telling us what government is doing. Philosophy is him telling you, this is my thinking about how I think. Right? How I think is about government. Thinking about how I think is philosophy. So he's actually not doing philosophy here. He is talking about those things that he has philosophized about, and he have arrived at these conclusions. So he wants to impregnate you with conclusions rather than philosophy. Well, wouldn't that be a sophist, right? So it's just like, oh, get the fuck out of my face, right? The exception to the rule. Yes, I know that. Command and respect, personal pseudo-universals. Yes, we have a general rule: everybody must pay tax except those who receive tax. Right? Swather have adapted to surviving on the shreds of power. The pilot fish living on the scraps of sharks' meals. The transition from coercion to voluntarism will not be easy, but as long as it's like the transition. It's like he's predicting like a prophet. It will happen in the future, the apocalypse, and then everything will be Jesus of philosophy, right? Get the frick out of my face. You have freedoms because past generations did not fail you. Do not fail the future, or there will be no future. No future for you. Oh, sample arguments. Okay, so this is where we are going into Plato dialogues, right? I don't want to read them out loud because it's sophistry. This is purely sophistry, right? This is the argument, and this is how we respond to it, according to me. So go out and do it, my little disciples, right? There's no such thing as free will. Another. Let me see if there are anything more than these examples. Holy. afterward, inevitable criticisms. Okay, we will have to do that one. I think we are close to the end of this book. There are 6 pages left, so this will probably be the final chapter afterward. Inevitable criticisms. Oh, he's trying to, what's it called? There will be people attacking me, but you can help me avoid their attacks by, supplying me with counterattack against these people who are out to get me, or something like that, right? In professional wrestling, and then again it starts up with some weird example, right? It's fucking annoying with all these examples, right? It's manipulative, right? Stay as much as you can with philosophy so you don't feel manipulated as a reader, right? Mullet-haired monster men often snarl at each other before matches, engaging in the time-honored tradition of trash talking. The purpose of this is to build anticipation for the match. It would be a very odd thing if after weeks of trash talking, only one of the wrestlers showed up for the fight. It would be considered an act of supreme cowardice to trash talk an opposing athlete with refusing to show up for the actual event. The same process often occurs in philosophy, wherein an opponent slanders you, insults you, surrounds you with a fiery moat of negative adjectives, while never actually addressing the content of your arguments. Well, I would agree with that. That's a common thing, right? It's common. The actual fight is about it's always Socrates who said, well, when you lose an argument, the only thing that is left is slander, right? So it's like, I know that I can't argue, but I feel there's something wrong, so I'm going to slander the person instead to make them feel down or, retract a bit so they don't present their arguments as fiercely as they otherwise would. So it's all this manipulation. As I said, most of human communication or humans communicating is about sophistry. It's manipulation. It's not about establishing objectivity or doing pure philosophy, right? As his books are a perfect example of, right? Everything between pure philosophy and direct propositions, clear propositions like that's an elephant, is basically to be treated as sophistry, in my opinion. Everything between those, even if it's a gradation, right? But anything else than that, pure philosophy or propositions, should be treated as some kind of manipulation or sophistry, right? That's my opinion, after all, right? I'm getting very close to settling on that as a working axiom for my approach to discussions. If you have the capacity to actually prove someone wrong, you do not. But philosophy is not about proving wrong or proving right. You fucking moron, right? You're this knight in the shining armor fighting for philosophy, right? That's not what it's about. It's about rigid thinking, right? It's about thinking rigidly about how you think. It's purely subjective, right? It's not about I'm going to prove you wrong, and therefore you're in this sort of a trench warfare, right? And it's never, ever in a fucking million years going to work for you, right? You have to meet people on the level you're doing the stuff, right? Some guy telling people how to ride a bicycle is not going to sit on the other end of the earth sending SMSs or text messages to people. This is how you bicycle. No, they would be there with the people doing the thing, riding the bicycle, saying, I do it this way, that way. You can put your ass this way or move your hands that way, or you can put on this, that much pressure in the tires, and so on and so on and so on and so on, right? It's actually doing the thing that is going to convince people of philosophy. Not you telling everybody it's a trench warfare, right? That's never, ever going to work. We all know this, but many people seem to constantly forget it at the same time. I have been reasoning, reading, debating, writing, and arguing in the realm of philosophy for over 35 years. I have an Ivy League education at the master's level, an argument from authority, right? And my dissertation was a deep thesis in the history of Western philosophy, for which I received top marks. Oh yeah, he's so fantastic. So because he got top marks from a corrupted educational system, all of a sudden, that which he claims is a bad system, academics, actually works for him because he's Stefan Molyneux, right? So therefore, he got top marks as somebody that nobody reads, right? It's not a good argument. It's actually fucking manipulation, right? Fallacious. For many years, I have had the privilege of hosting the world's largest and most popular philosophy show with over 500 million views and downloads. I have interviewed hundreds of subject matter experts in a wide variety of fields, debatable professionals and lay people. None of this means my arguments are correct, of course. I could have achieved all of this and still be spectacularly wrong. Well, that's at least, it's a notch at some self-criticism, right? I will, give him thumbs up for that, at least. But let's see how deep it goes, right? There are many thinkers with greater credentials than I have, whom I consider to be spectacularly wrong. Not just wrong, but spectacularly wrong, right? Neither credentials nor experience fundamentally matter in terms of the argument. I'm just thinking how he's brought in these so-called experts, but that is sort of scientific, you could say, experts on social stuff, experts on politics, experts on political stuff, whatever. Never ever can I, in my broadest memory, think of even one instance where he's brought in somebody who's actually a philosopher, or who is purely into philosophy, right? Who is sort of, there are certain discussions here. There was one guy called Tjen, something like that, where they discussed transcendental whatever. He's possibly what would that be? A sort of Christian Platonist, something Aristotelian Platonist. I don't know what these guys do, right? So it's always getting around Hume's sort, right? Nobody can seem to be able to cross that bridge, right? Okay, he was supposedly a educated philosopher. I don't necessarily mean you have to be educated academically. I'm fine with people like Stefan Molyneux, who's worked himself up. I don't care much about his history degree. In fact, I don't care one fucking bit, right? It's a waste of time. Basically, it's a waste of time. You can read the history of philosophy in your spare time. Why would you spend 5 years in a university reading the history of philosophy, right? So he wants to be an academic, basically, but nobody wanted him because he possibly didn't either function in the system or was so bad at doing whatever he did that he was kicked out, right? So it's like, how many anarchists have you had on the show, right? I can think of very few, like Corbett, from the Corbett report, and maybe Jeff Berwick way back. Or did Jeff Berwick have him on his show? Maybe that's more like it, right? And what about one like Larkin Rose? He never had Larkin. He was supposedly an anarchist and still is. Apparently, I don't know. I understand his thinking, right? But at least for 10 years he was an all-out anarchist, right? And did he ever bring Larkin Rose in for a discussion? Never, right? He's the biggest philosophy show in the world. Does he bring in philosophers? No, right? So what it's about is you thinking that he wants to convince you that he is the only freaking guy in the world who can do correct philosophy. That's his stick, right? That's what he has to do. He has to convince you he is the only one who can bring good philosophy to the world, and therefore he needs your money, right? What has it evolved into? It has evolved into him being an anarchist while doing the Orange Man, right? Him be an atheist while sucking the dick of religion, right? Or Christianity. It's like, Can it get more ridiculous, right? Why are people still taking this dude seriously? Okay. I bring all of this up because no doubt it will be attacked and scorned with regards to experience or credentials and what have you. I am wrong, some will say, because I do not hold a PhD in philosophy from Harvard or Yale. This is a fascinating position. I really cannot call it an argument because the entire history of philosophy is the history of rejecting authority in favor of reason and evidence. Academic philosophers will, with doctorates, worship Socrates. Socrates had no doctorate and scorned arguments from authority. As the saying goes, well, he did an argument from authority, right? I have an Ivy League education at the master's level, and my dissertation was a deep thesis on the history for which I received top marks, right? An argument from authority, you fucking bastard, man, right? It's so obvious. You just need to learn to read between the lines what he's saying. He has no clue what he's doing, right? It's his business model. This is how he survives. This is how he gets to be a stay-at-home dad instead of having to pendle back and forth to some odd job to stay alive, right? It's a business model. It's not philosophy. A refusal... Oh, I think I got ahead of myself here. This is a fascinating position. I really cannot call it an argument because the entire history of philosophy is the history of rejecting authority. Yeah, okay. Socrates, with philosophy, it goes even further. All philosophy is founded on hostility towards authority. I don't think so. I mean, what it rejects is habitual thinking, right? And habitual thinking might have been imposed by some kind of authority. It usually is. Or, and you know, extended with your own sort of low-level pocket philosophy, right? To make things look cohesive. But basically, your thinking is imposed using authority, right? So if you just react towards authority, you're not on the right path through philosophy. You have to think about what you're thinking, not the authority that imposed it on you, right? It's a good step to start saying, okay, I'm not going to listen to anybody calling themselves a authority. And at the same time, well, isn't that what Stefan Molyneux wants to present himself as? An authority telling you this is where the future needs to go and give me money, right? Philosophy is the ultimate democratic discipline. Rational philosophy holds that individuals are entirely capable of processing reality, of reasoning effectively, and coming up with the right conclusions. Philosophy empowers individuals with the capacity to push back against irrational, anti-rational authority using their own individual capacity for thought. Generally, a refusal to rebut the content of an argument is a confession of cowardice, incompetence, and malevolence. Insulting your opponent, at least absent clear rebuttals to arguments, is a philosophy, not its fulfillment. This is not to say that philosophers must engage with every person who makes a mistake. We do not, me and my little followers, become like the hapless husband in a famous cartoon who says his wife that he cannot possibly come to bed yet because someone is wrong on the internet. However, when someone of prominence and influence is publicly making bad arguments, philosophers are honor-bound to push back against these errors. Well, I'm pushing back as hard as I can against Stefan Molyneux, right? I mean, his argument for how he proves his small system is just about one of the most stupid arguments I have ever seen in my life, right? I can't think of a more ridiculously bad argument, and it is the core of his philosophy, right? As he said earlier in the book, now we turn to the heart of philosophy, ethics, right? Morality. And then when you read his book, his argument for why he's right about his stuff is so freaking bad. It's like you have to pinch yourself, right? Go listen to part 11 of my deconstruction of UPB, which is called the syllogism from hell, right? So then you get an idea of what I'm talking about here, right? So I'm honor bound apparently to push back. Well, I'm doing that already. So I'm, following the onerous footsteps of good philosophers, right? If you call your wrestling opponent a coward, but then refuse to show up to the fight, your criticism is utterly exposed as projection. It is you who are the coward. If you call your intellectual wrong, then refuse to show up. But why? Everybody you have talked with are not showing up at the discussion, or are you choosing only people you know will eject out of the discussion, so you can say, well, nobody wants to debate me. It's manipulative, right? You can find a lot of people who will debate him, like, professional philosophers. Yeah, I know that I'm not into academics, and I don't like the idea of academic philosophers. But that doesn't mean they can't argue, right? That doesn't mean they can't do philosophy. They just have a bad incentive structure. The more extravagant your trash talking of your opponent, the more your cowardice is revealed when you refuse to fight him. Oh, what a sophist, right? The more hysterical your abuse of your intellectual opponent, the more your cowardice is revealed when you avoid to debate him. A number of words and phrases show up as distinct tells for intellectual cowardice. I'm sure I will receive some of them. So it's worth going over them briefly, as I said above. For philosophy, prevention is by far the better. So he's trying to, it's so sophist, right? He's sort of, okay, now I presented my philosophy, and he knows it's bullshit, right? Oh, maybe he doesn't even know that, right? He thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? And but he knows he has to protect himself, saying, okay, everybody who comes to argue, they possibly don't have any argument, so we can reject them outright, right? And this, my little peons, my little disciples, this is what you're going to have to do for me. Protect me, protect my business model, right? Generic pejoratives. Calling someone's argument reductionist or simplistic or amateurish or unconvincing is a boring way of saying that you are too cowardly or stupid to engage in a debate. If someone is calling someone a misogynist, a cult leader, a racist, we all understand that none of these are arguments. They're confession of intellectual cowardice. If you show up to an... Okay, when I was... The 4 days I was a part of the behind the curtain of Free Domain, right? I kept asking for how money is, handled in this system, right? And everybody told me the only one who knows anything about the money in that system is Stefan Molyneux, right? And another point of a cult is that there's only one thing to do it, and that is what the cult leader says, right? This is the cult leader telling you, when they say this, you can attack them, this, or you can attack them. There's only one thing, and that is me, and I'm going to save the world. And this is Jesus' philosophy talking. This is not a philosopher, right? It's somebody who has megalomaniac ideas about their own self-worth, right? He thinks he's not only the one who can save the world, but he's the only one who can save the world, right? It should tell you a thing or two, right? So no matter what he says, it is cultish, right? And because it's cultish, people will call it cultish. And there he says, okay, calling someone a misogynist, a cult leader. He's sort of grooming the reader into helping him attack anybody criticizing his bullshit, right? So, if you go to an optometrist to get help with blurry vision, is your problem solved if your optometrist merely rails against the greed of the eyeglass industry or says that all vision is merely subjective to how you learn? Another trick is to call someone over-ambitious and grandiose. Oh, I just did that, right? Oh, so he knows that when people draw conclusions about this. Now, I have done a complete deconstruction, at least as complete as it needs to be until this point, and basically the old book, right? And have his book called The Art of the Argument, and his book called Universally Preferable Behavior. So I've deconstructed very much sentence by sentence, right? And my conclusion is he's full of it, right? He's overambitious and grandiose, right? He is. There's no way around it. There's only way to... And it doesn't really matter if that's the case or not. You should be able to understand it's fucking ridiculously bad philosophy. It's actually close not to being philosophy at all. as I pointed out again and again and again in these deconstructions. I am fully aware that I have taken an enormous philosophical problems in this book and the grandiosity, to call someone overambitious and grandiose, and then I am fully aware that I'm taking enormous philosophical problems and claim to have solved them. Yeah, that's not grandiose at all. No, not at all. Not grandiose. No. Be careful with these people call you grandiose, because I think I've taken on enormous philosophical problems and claim to have solved them. He's fucking shitting in your face, right? This is an ambitious project, to be sure. Calling it overambitious is not an argument. Another trick is to call an argument incomplete, which is a variation of the no true Scotsman fallacy. Okay, I am not actually sure what that is. All arguments are incomplete because language has limitations. We are mortal readers who... okay. Aramaic, or I may have failed to address the ethic problem of a particular Indian philosopher, and I may not have rebutted some article against me, but so what? Okay, but you might have read some Hume, for instance, right? Hume's is-ought gap, which is one of your working axioms of some kind in your book of ethics, right? And you don't fucking even understand what Hume is saying. And then you're trying to refute Hume by using his statement against him, right? Now that is fucking bad arguments, right? So I don't care if some obscure Indian philosopher. It's just like you're trying to say that, yeah, okay, there might be some dude in India I haven't read, but I know everything else, right? That's megalomaniac, and it's also a lie, because you cannot possibly have read all that which you are implicitly stating here that you have read, right? If the definition of complete is pretty much synonymous with omniscient, it can be safely discarded as a... So basically, there's no way to debate him, because if he's always finds, okay, you said that, and that means I can reject all you're saying because you're not doing it the right way, right? These are all the get out of jail cards that him and his acolytes are, gearing up to use against anybody trying to debate with this guy, right? And then there's another reason why I'm doing it this way instead, right? You don't want to debate this sophist, right? He's full of himself. I would not even think of reading Stefan Molyneux if I wanted to read some good philosophy. I'm not saying that a lot of good philosophy. I would say that the greatest philosopher I have ever read is David Hume. He seems to has his head screwed on correctly, right? Most other philosophers, they get out on a tangent and they lure themselves into a corner, and then they have to conjure up something weird in order to solve the problem, right? Hume stays with very strong skepticism, and that's the way you do it, right? Yeah. You can read this for yourself. Here's another way you can avoid getting into the ring with a strong thinker. Oh, he's a strong thinker, right? He's not just a thinker, he's a strong thinker. It's all about these muscles and fighting the demons and, oh, I'm so big and strong, right? Oh. Sophistry. Find the least popular person who likes that. Okay, here's another way you can avoid getting into the ring with a strong thinker. Find the least popular person who likes that thinker's argument, and then promote that unpopular person as a guilt by association representative. These are all sort of fallacies that people use in argumentation, quote, right? Yeah, we know about those. I know about those. I can only speak for myself, sorry. Exposing the personal hypocrisies of your opponent can also be... but that's what he's also guilty of, right? When I was behind the curtain on Free Domain, somebody over there went back to my YouTube channel, found some video I'd done on Stefan Molyneux, and then Molyneux apparently had been looking through it a bit, and then some 15 minutes into it, he had found some little statement I made that he considered incorrect, and therefore he said, therefore you shouldn't listen to that guy. Right? It's maybe that's not what he's actually saying here, but I just remember that was ridiculous, right? And it's like he has gone there as the big authority on what is right and wrong philosophy. He has checked that guy's video, go back to his acolytes and say, you don't need to look any further. He has said this, therefore he's bad, so don't go and look, right? Don't think for yourself, my little community, right? My little congregation. No, it's on that level. It's on that level. That's what he does. He's not encouraging philosophy. He's encouraging authority. He is the strong thinker that has to do it for you, right? Pointing out that someone has been wrong in the past can also be a good way. Oh, yeah. This is sort of the art of the argument, summarized. No, even basically, yeah, you can take that yourself, right? So that was it. That's the sense of philosophy. Oh man. In the other, at least in UPB deconstruction, I did a final verdict video. I'm not going to do that here, right? Because I'm sort of lost for words. I don't know actually how to approach this, right? And basically I don't want to approach it. I don't want to poison my thinking with bad philosophy if it is at all philosophy. I want to do it on my own, right? I would rather think for myself than trying to use this as any kind of guidance to philosophy. Are you enlightened in any way about this? I mean, give me a shout out if you think this is great and why you think it's great. I mean, have you read this book before you got to this deconstruction? Give me a comment on what you think of it. I mean, I think it sucks to high heaven, this, right? I don't want to use Christian language, but it's very, very badly written, right? It's like just I feel like he's just, well, one day, a couple of years ago, he said, I think I have to write the book on essential philosophy. I'm just going to sit down and write. And then, there are 180 pages there. I think I wrote a book. Let me see, there's a spelling error there. Maybe you use another term for that one. Shown it to his wife or something like that, right? Or his peons or his most trusted acolytes on the forum, right? And then they can't find any problem anywhere because they are sucking his dick, right? And his wife says, oh, you're so great. So just, there's a spelling error. I would use that. Okay, is that anybody else? No. Okay, then I'll just throw the book out to everybody, right? No. This is so far from what good, decent, pure philosophy should be, in my opinion, right? Now, I have mentioned a few times that I'm myself writing a book, and you could say that it's a kind of essential philosophy, but it's not a lecturing book. I'm not telling you this is what we're dealing with in philosophy. I am actually doing the philosophy. I am philosophizing through the whole book, right? So it's like, it's the approach I have never seen anybody else take. I'm not trying to I could be this is completely ridiculous idea. I've chosen this path, right? But I feel confident that this is when I'm saying this is how I work, this is how I think, this is how I experience, this is what my philosophy is. I'm not telling anybody what to do and how to think and labeling these people as bad and labeling these people as good or whatever, right? I don't have to make a congregation. I'm actually strong enough to stand by my own thinking and being completely subjective about it, right? And maybe people will say, okay, I'm going to listen because it's actually more interesting when he's just talking about himself rather than telling me what I should think, right? And this is so loaded with that approach that you're going to say, oh, no, please get away from me, Molyneux, right? So you're not inviting people in, you are actually you're possibly solidifying your fan base, which is possibly one of the goals, right? And then creating a larger trench warfare, no man's land, from where you can fight with your acolytes towards all these bad people out there who can't argue and all that, right? Because you're such a great thinker. So I think I will leave it there and leave it up to you to do the rest. All the parts I jumped through because I've done something similar in other books. So I will leave it at that, and I hope that you enjoyed this many hours of deconstruction. I think it's necessary to do things like this. I feel that it's the right way to approach this, right? Even it is very long-winded and boring and meticulous and all that. In the end, this is what is going to, if anybody's going to take a criticism seriously, it has to be done like this, in my opinion. You can't just say, well, I read the book and it's bad because this and that. And then he will bring out all his guns and say, well, you argued the wrong way. I'm not going to take you seriously. Actually, I'm not interested in what Stefan Molyneux thinks. I don't really care too much about what he thinks. I want other people not to take him seriously. That's what I want to happen, right? Because if it was good philosophy, I would say, well, I think it's good philosophy because of this, that, and the other. But all I see is bad philosophy from here and, and as far as the eye can see, right? As far as my eye can see. So it's crap, right? So that's the conclusion. It's crap. It's a trap. It's a crap. Okay. Have a nice day, and maybe I will take on some other deconstruction in the future. I like this kind of philosophy. It also helps me think about these particular philosophical aspects, and a few times in my previous deconstructions, it has actually helped me get to the bottom of some parts of my own philosophy that was sort of unclear and unsettled yet. And I sort of took a stab at it and found out, whoa, I got into some new thinking, right? So there's nothing that is so bad it's not good for anything, right? So have a nice day.